YouTube? Today I'm talking about this beast right here. This is my Canon C300 Mark III. This is my cinema camera. This is the camera that I will shoot with if I have the option. I love it, and today I'm gonna talk about 8 things that I love about this camera. It's actually 9, now that I think about it. Correction, 9 things I love about this camera, and 9 is just the number that I came up with. So yeah, that's gonna be this video. I'm gonna do another video here that is several things that I don't like about the camera. There's not a lot, but there are a few things that I don't love about this camera, so that video will be coming out soon. And then finally, in this sort of kind of C300 Mark III series of videos, I'm gonna do a video about who I think this camera is for, whose needs it fits really, really well, who might want to consider buying this thing. Chances are, if you're considering dropping the kind of coin that a camera like this costs, you know whether or not it's for you. But be sure to go ahead and subscribe, because those will be coming relatively soon as well. Getting right into it, the first thing that I really, really like about this camera is the form factor. Now, I'm the type of person who really likes the form factor of a cinema camera in general. When I say I love the form factor, I mean this cinema camera in particular. I really, really love the form factor. Now, I have owned several C100 Mark IIs. Those were my first cinema cameras back in the day. I had a C200 that I just recently got rid of whenever I got this camera, and now I'm onto this camera. I've shot with Sony's, with the FS7 Mark IIs. I haven't shot with the FX9, but the form factor is very similar to the FS7. I have shot even on some of the lower scale red stuff like the Raven, Black Magic, any of them. I like this camera, how it's built, how it's laid out so much more. It's like Canon took what Arri has been doing with their Alexa Mini and making this small little cube-like camera, and they saw that it was working really well, and Canon went ahead and did that, but then they retained all the stuff that we love about Canon cinema cameras, which are, you know, all the customizable buttons on this side over here, all the access that you have without having to dive into menus or anything like that. So these are the best designed cameras that Canon has ever done in their cinema line. I'm a huge fan. Now, the number 2 thing I really love about this camera, and again, this is shared with the C500 Mark II, are the codecs. The codecs in this camera are probably the most well-rounded, or makes this the most well-rounded camera that Canon has made. The RAW is great, 12 or 10-bit, and then XF-AVC, 10-bit across the board XF-AVC, and both those codecs are awesome. You know, we all know and love the flexibility of RAW and what that does for us. But with this camera, the XF-AVC is no joke either. It edits better, it edits smoother, it's easier to work with, it takes less time. There's the added benefit that the file sizes are about 20% smaller than the RAW. They're not a lot smaller. They're still pretty big file sizes, but they are smaller. And it's nice to know that you have that XF-AVC option that is just as high quality in terms of the image quality as the RAW is. It's a great codec. So that's number 2. I really love the codecs that are in this camera. The third thing that I really love about this camera is that there are no limitations, or very minor limitations. Now, I've never really been a subscriber to this kind of thinking that Canon is intentionally giving us crippled cameras with lowered capabilities in order to push us towards higher end, more expensive cinema cameras. I just shoot with these cameras inside the context of what they're good for. So I've always kind of used cameras that way, where if you know you have certain things that you need in a camera and a camera's technical abilities don't fit into that, then use a different camera. But with that, this camera does not limit its capabilities at all. So it doesn't matter if you're shooting RAW or XF-AVC or C-Log or C-Log 2 or C-Log 3, or if you're at 120 frames a second, or if you're at 24 frames a second. Like, it does not matter. Autofocus, no autofocus, writing to 2 card slot, like, it makes zero difference whatsoever. All the features that I would want are available all the time, no matter what the other settings in the camera are. And that is really awesome on a shoot day, to not have to worry about whether or not the capabilities of my camera are going to change and have to make creative decisions around that. This camera is consistent. It doesn't crop in on the sensor. You don't lose any of the capabilities of the camera depending on other settings. So that is number 3. I really love that about this camera. Here goes number 4. The fourth thing that I really love about this camera, the sensor size. So this is a Super 35 sensor camera, which I've always really liked the Super 35 format, but in this particular camera, it's actually a bit larger than Super 35. I've found that this camera, typical Super 35 crop factor, equivalent to full frame, is about a 1.6x. That's not like a hard fast standard, but by and large, you will find that most Super 35 classified camera sensors are about a 1.6 crop factor. This camera is about a 1.4, to be really exact, about a 1.44x crop factor, I think. So you get a little bit more field of view out of this camera than you do from other similar Super 35 sensors. Anytime you get increased sensor real estate, that's a really good thing. That's a really big bonus. You get bigger pixel pitch, especially that this is a 4K sensor and not like a 6 or 8K sensor. Better dynamic range, especially combined with the dual gain output sensor, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. So really love the sensor size in this camera, both because I like the Super 35 format in general, but the fact that this is slightly larger than Super 35 is a big bonus as well. All right, the next thing I like about this camera is the audio controls. Their preamps and their cinema cameras are incredible, and this has been across the board. The C100 Mark II that I had, the C200 that I had, and now this camera, they all have amazing audio preamps to run audio directly in. Right now I'm recording externally to this. This is a Zoom F6 external audio recorder. These preamps, this is a $650 audio recorder. In terms of the cleanliness and the noise floor and just how the preamps perform, these preamps are by and large indistinguishable from the preamps in this dedicated audio recorder. So love the audio situation of the C300 Mark III and subsequently the C500 Mark II, because it's the same exact external camera. The next thing that I really love about this camera is the CF Express card media format that it uses. Now, it's not really unique to this camera. A lot of the new cameras coming out these days are using CF Express, either Type A or Type B. But I really love the CF Express media format. It's super fast. It's super reliable. It's really awesome that this camera has 3 card slots and you can record redundant and a proxy. All kind of workflow options depending on what your workflow is like. I really like that. Something to keep in mind, the CF Express cards are super expensive. I mean, I own $3,000 worth of memory cards for just this camera alone. Like a 650 gigabyte Cobalt Pro grade digital CF Express card that I use in this camera, I think is almost $700. So that is something to be very conscious of, is what type of media does the camera you're looking at shoot on, because media, depending on the kind of media that it is, it can get really expensive. All right, number 7. I think number 7. We're going to go with it. Number 7, something I really, really love about this camera is the built-in ND filters. Now, that should go without saying. If you know anything about cinema cameras, you'll know that everybody loves the built-in ND filters. This camera will do up to 10 stops of ND with the built-in ND filters. Now, I run a matte box. This is the Polar Pro Basecamp matte box, which has a variable ND option, and I do that. I run the 2 to 5 stop variable ND in my matte box. So in conjunction with the 10 stops of ND in camera, I can get up to 15 stops of ND So I really have like total control across any lighting situation to be able to control my exposure, which is super awesome. But all that to say, I do not need to run ND in my matte box. I could totally get away with just the built-in ND. And if I'm in a situation where I need to be a lot more nimble and kind of strip this camera rig back a little bit, I will do that and not run a matte box with ND in it. And I'll just use the built-in NDs in the camera. So it's really awesome to be able to have that feature. It makes shooting so much easier when you're out on location or on set than to be worrying about swapping out filters and doing all kinds of different things. So super useful having built-in ND. All right, next up, something I really love about this camera is the touchscreen autofocus, which on a cinema camera, you're like, autofocus, I don't know. But we all know Canon has great autofocus. It makes it so nice, whether you're hand holding it or flying it on a gimbal, you're able to have touch enabled autofocus that's like not just passable, but really, really good on a cinema camera. So it makes this camera really ideal for like running and gunning, documentary, wedding films, all different kinds of stuff. So they knocked it out of the park with the autofocus in this camera. Super useful, makes shooting with the camera that much more practical and enjoyable. Now, last but certainly not least, I think this is number 9 of things that I really like about this camera is, I said I was gonna talk about it earlier, is the dual gain output sensor. Now, if you're wondering what the crap is dual gain output, Canon is calling it, they've branded it as DGO, dual gain output. And it was pioneered in this camera. It's now in the C70. This is the first camera that was ever released with it. But essentially what it is, it's not like a dual native ISO sensor like you might see in the Sony cameras and the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema cameras. What this sensor is doing is it is simultaneously processing at 2 different levels, one level prioritizing saturation and color, and one prioritizing low noise, and then it's combining those 2 images and sending them straight out into one really nice high dynamic range file. So what that does is it enables you to get really, really good dynamic range out of this camera. I think it's advertised at 16.5 stops of dynamic range. And if I had to put my finger on one quality that makes an image look cinematic, it's dynamic range. So this is Canon's first attempt at really tackling that sort of high dynamic range kind of solution in a camera, and I think they killed it. There is noticeably more dynamic range in this camera than there was in the C200, by like a noticeable amount, not by like a pixel peeping like minuscule amount, but very noticeably. This camera is actually, because of the dual gain output sensor, is actually advertised to have more dynamic range than even the C500 Mark II, which costs another $5,000 more than this camera. So it's an incredible sensor. I think Canon did a really, really good job for their first pass at this sort of high dynamic range processed image pipeline. So that's it, guys. If you liked this video and you'd be interested about things I don't like about this camera, who I think this camera is for, and then probably I'll do some accessories, some of my favorite camera accessories for this rig that I have for the C300 Mark III. If you are interested in any of those videos, be sure to hit the subscribe button and follow along on this channel, because those videos will be coming out soon. Yeah, with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we'll see you in the next video. Much love. Peace.